Well, this is the time of year when pine wilt starts showing up in our landscapes. And with us today is Sharon von Broembsen. She is an extension plant pathologist with OSU. And Sharon, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
Now, Sharon, for a review for our viewers, maybe you could go over what you see with pine wilt.
Well, unfortunately, the most outstanding symptom of pine wilt is that a apparently healthy pine tree just suddenly dies, and that usually happens sometime between August and December. And unfortunately, the problem started in the late spring, early summer when the tree became infected with a nematode. Now, this is a really unusual story because most nematodes attack trees and other plants in the soil to attack their roots. But this nematode lives in the upper parts of pine trees and is moved from tree to tree for new infections by an insect called the pine sawyer. So that pine sawyer brings the nematode to the tree in May or June of the year. It then moves around inside the tree and reproduces many times and interferes with the production of resin in the tree so that the resin becomes sluggish and sticky and hard and blocks up the pine's xylem vessels, and the tree suddenly wilts. And it's a very heartbreaking disease because there's no control for it. And the only thing that a homeowner or a person who manages a landscape can do is just cut down the tree. And it's very important, in fact, that they do cut down the tree, level with the ground, cover the stump up with some soil, and that it be taken somewhere and either burned or buried or chipped up, because we don't want that material to be left so that the pine sawyer could come back and visit it and pick up more nematodes and move them onto trees again. So if you get rid of the trees, that's one big thing that will help.
Okay. Now, is it important the time of year that you get rid of the trees? Like, you need to have them out of there by some time?
Yes, that is very important. That's a very good question. Since the pine sawyer transfers the disease from the dead and diseased trees to the new plants that it's going to infect in May and June, you want to make sure that those dead pine trees are out of the landscape by that time.
Okay.
That's really important.
All right. Now, you said the nematodes are transferred by the pine sawyer. One might think, gosh, well, I'll just spray my trees for this beetle. Does that work?
The movements of the pine sawyer and its habits make it almost impossible to be able to control by controlling the insect. And it's not recommended that you try to control the insect. There is really no control. The other thing that I should mention, the only other control, is that you should think about what you're planting when you go to plant new pine trees, because the problems that we've had with pines in Oklahoma in recent years has been, a lot of it has been Scots pine, which has been heavily hit with this pine wilt disease. And one of the reasons is that it's highly susceptible, as are some of the Japanese red and the Japanese black pine, because this particular disease and its insect have evolved in the eastern half of the United States they have evolved with the pine trees. So most of our native trees have some sort of resistance, at least when they're growing where they're supposed to.
Right.
But it's these trees that we bring in, these exotic pines, that are hit the hardest. It has also been recorded on a few numbers of Austrian pine, but we really need the Austrian pine in the western part of the state, so I'm not advising that we don't grow it. Right now, people are experimenting here in Oklahoma with what other kinds of pines they can substitute for the Scots and Japanese pines, so that we have less problem. But it doesn't take out like a whole lot of pines in any one year. I know a lot of people think that there are a lot of pines dying and they think it's all pine wilt, but that's not true. It's a kind of a random thing. The only problem is that once the tree is infected, it dies, and it dies within a few months.
Okay.
And there is really nothing you can do at that point.
Now, if you have a tree that dies from pine wilt, how do you find out that's what killed your tree?
Fortunately, we have a really good test for the pine wilt nematode. We take pieces of the wood that have it in and put it into liquid, bubble oxygen in there, and let it come out, and they can be positively identified with a microscopic test. We can do that at the OSU Plant Disease and Insect Diagnostic Lab, and you can get that through the OSU campus operator can put you in touch there. One of the things that's really important, I have a sample here that came in last week to us. And it came in from Cleveland County, and this is a really good sample. The most important thing is this branch, which was cut from near the trunk of the tree that had recently died, And as you can see, it's about, an inch and a half going on 2 inches in diameter. And it was cut right up next to the trunk. We ask that, in fact, a branch of that size cut near the trunk of the tree that's recently died, and even just a wedge of the cross section near the base of the trunk be sent in. Now, about 4 inches of this particular branch was used to isolate the nematodes out, and 70,000 nematodes came out of that 4-inch piece of this branch. So this is a nematode that can reproduce very rapidly and to a great extent, and that's why it's such a dangerous disease.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.